All right, grade 7 sports and games in Africa. That's what we're looking at today. This is a fun one. This is a fun one because we get to learn about all the sports and games that kids and adults alike play in Africa, different parts of Western Africa, but also all over the continent. Popular sports. Have you ever wondered why hockey is so popular in Canada? It's pretty obvious. Of course, it's a great game. We have a lot of snow in the winter, and we have ponds, just like that picture you see there from Lake Louise in Alberta. Gorgeous place if you've ever been. That's near Banff, and just that picture is just so Canadian, right? And that's a reason that we have hockey, because we can play outside. But we also, so climate plays a huge role. So my questions there are, why do you think so many Canadians like hockey? For one thing, hockey suits our climate. It gives us a way to be active during long, cold winters. It's also a competitive game, and many Canadians support the idea of healthy competition. What other reasons can you think of for hockey's popularity? Think about it. Popular sports in Africa. In this lesson, you'll explore how people in another part of the world, Africa, play games and sports. Since Africa is a big continent with many cultures, the lesson focuses on Nigeria, one country in particular. You'll learn about some of the most popular games played there. You'll explore how sports can be an expression of culture and what factors influence the sports people play. You'll also look at how and why some sports are more popular than others around the world. For example, always coming back to ice hockey. If you go to one of these other countries, if you go to a country in Africa, for example, some people may know what hockey is. They may not even know what the sport of hockey actually is, which is hard to believe. But it makes a lot of sense because hockey couldn't really exist in those cultures. It's way too hot, and they wouldn't have the finances available to have an indoor hockey rink. There may be a few, but it would be very limited. Even in places in certain countries in Southern Europe, even, Spain isn't going to have a lot of hockey. Places in the Mediterranean. Asian countries are starting to play a little bit more hockey, but even then, that has to do more with culture. Culture plays a big role in sport too. So if a certain sport like hockey hasn't really been part of your history as a country, then likely you're not going to be playing very much of it. So this is an interesting game. It's called Morabaraba. I think I kind of pronounced that correctly, possibly. Do you play board games? Each day, millions of people in Africa play a board game called Morabaraba. It is a game of mental skill. It was invented in Egypt more than 3,000 years ago. The game is easy to learn and costs little to play. It is so popular today that one Morabaraba tournament attracted over 36,000 people. It's amazing to think about these games that are extremely popular in other areas of the world that we've never actually heard of. Looking at the game makes me think of a game called Crokinole. Crokinole is actually a Canadian game. I wonder if you guys know what that is. Morabaraba is an indigenous game. Remember the map of cultures in Africa that I showed you? The massive amount of cultures that there were, like literally thousands. Each culture would have their own games and sports. So there are an incredible amount of indigenous games in Africa. And that's going to become part of your assignment. So we'll just pause there. Keep on watching this video through, but I'm not going to tell you about those indigenous games. You're actually going to do that research. So factors influencing sports. What factors influence sports people play? Well, there are many. For example, how does climate affect the sports that are played? You probably don't think of Africa as a place where people play a lot of winter sports. You're right. Looking at that picture right there, it's going to be pretty tough for them to play hockey unless it's field hockey. The hot climate in African countries makes sports like skating and hockey very difficult, if not impossible. You know that hockey is popular in Canada. One of the reasons is because it suits our cold winter climate. In the same way, certain sports are popular in Nigeria because they suit the hot climate there. Sports like soccer are cheap and can be played outdoors. Soccer is an incredible sport. We've got to really kind of think about that. Soccer's a sport that can be played practically anywhere with just any sort of ball. If you don't have a regulation soccer ball, you can use stuff like tape and tape a whole ball all together, and you can use it as a soccer ball. I'm sure you've seen videos about this. It's pretty incredible. It's an amazing sport that anyone can literally play. If you don't have tape on hand or something to make a ball, you could use some sort of you could create it by some sort of natural materials, right? Leaves and things. You can put it together and try to make a ball out of it. And people do this. People will make balls in certain communities in Africa, and they'll play with them for years. When I was in Tanzania with the school, we would play soccer with some kids, and the soccer balls they had were balls like ones that we would get at the store, but it looked like they have played with them for literally decades. Like, it looked like this ball, has been through history, which is really neat that that it's that accessible, that sport is that accessible. And that's all you need. You don't need field, you don't need a turf, you don't need perfect grass. You can have dirt. You can play soccer in the forest, right? It's literally you're kicking a ball with your feet. So, it would be hard with trees around. Not gonna lie. But the important part is that you can play soccer anywhere, essentially. Anywhere but the jungle, I'd say. Economics and sports. Earlier in the year, we learned about the term economics. That's what kind of rolls our economy. The economy also plays a big role in the sports that we play. If you are fortunate enough, you may live near a community center, like this one pictured here with an indoor swimming pool. But it costs money to build and run those centers. So there has to be enough money and enough people in the community to help run them, right? That's a really expensive facility. And it's important to have in these developed countries with the people who have all the money to have something like that, because it's very good for health and well-being. But in Africa, many communities do not have the money for expensive equipment and buildings like this one. So this is why, again, a sport like soccer is so popular, or all of these other indigenous sports that I'm going to have you guys research as your activity today. But there are lots of very simple games and simple sports. The simplicity is important for these games and sports to be so popular in countries in Africa. Values in sports. What values do you learn from playing sports? There are many of them. Do you think everyone should have the opportunity to participate in sports? Why? Today, almost all cultures believe that it is important for children to enjoy play. Sports and games are a way to be physically active. They help people stay healthy. Playing sports and games also teaches people new skills and how to get along with one another. Social values are often reflected in sports and games. Some cultures value cooperation and teamwork. Others encourage independence and competition. I want you to think about this for a little bit. Going back to hockey, for example. Hockey is an interesting sport. It's extremely expensive. Not all Canadians have the right to play hockey, unfortunately. And there's an organization called Right to Play, and it is actually an initiative that is basically a fundraising group that their main goal is to get kids playing the sports that they want to play. And so it is so critical and so important that we give all kids equal opportunity at playing sports. It's very difficult with a sport like hockey because ice hockey is expensive. We have to pay for that hockey rink. We have to pay for the cooling of that hockey rink, which is expensive, right? You're basically paying for a gigantic freezer. You also have to pay for all of the equipment because if you don't have the right equipment, it can be a very dangerous sport. You have this rubber puck, this very hard rubber puck flying around the rink, and you don't want to get hit with it. So you have to spend a lot of money on all this equipment. You need things like skates. Some of that equipment is extremely expensive. Skates are expensive. Hockey sticks are expensive. And so if you come from a family who is quite well off or has the money to put towards this, that's really, really awesome. And you're very, very fortunate. I was one of those people. When I was younger, I was so lucky and fortunate to be able to play hockey. But some of my peers or classmates at school didn't have that same opportunity. They didn't have their families didn't have the money that they needed in order for them to play hockey, and they couldn't actually learn how to play. So I think that's really quite unfair, and I really would like to challenge you guys to use hockey as an example and think about ways that we could make that fair, make that equal. How could we, as a society or community, how could we come together? Even you can use, you can use the local areas around the valley as an example to try to, come up with an initiative in how we could allow everyone to play hockey, allow everyone to learn how to play hockey. Wondering what you guys can come up with there. So your assignment today is in 2 parts. Your assignment is to answer the questions on the discussion forum titled Lesson 12. Number 1, like other African countries, Nigeria is largely rural. Remember that word rural? Rural meaning it's in the country. The opposite of rural is urban. Urban is meaning city. People who live in city live in urban areas. Many Nigerians who live in rural areas do not even have electricity. So how do you think this affects the sports and games that they play without electricity? That being said, this textbook is a little bit older, and I imagine that many of those communities have solar power now. It's incredible that even in the past 5 or 10 years, there is so much more solar energy in these little towns in Africa. It's absolutely phenomenal. Number 2, research the following African indigenous games online, and for each one, write 1 to 2 sentences describing the game. This is sort of your biggest project today. It's not too much, but it's a rainy day today, so you can take some time and check these out. I encourage you to go to YouTube and check out some videos of them being played. We've got Dibeke, Diketo, I don't know if I'm pronouncing those right, Jukske, Ntimo, Nkuva. I really want you to enjoy researching these 5 sports that most of you probably have never heard of. I imagine James Griffiths and obviously probably Ora Ofori have probably heard of 1 or 2 of these sports because they are, of course, from Africa. That's it. Have a fantastic rainy day, folks. Watch some YouTube videos of these sports. Get into them. Maybe if you are really quite bored, maybe with your family members or something, you could create that game. You could create that board game, Morabaraba, because that would be interesting. Okay, cool. Have a great day. See you later.